Shall we start now, sir?
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Mr. Mark Z. P. Arevalo from the University of the Philippines Open University and currently taking up Diploma in Social Studies Education. And now we shall have a conversation with a visitor from the United States of America who is teaching social studies as well. So, okay. So let me introduce to you our very special guest for today. He's coming from the United States of America, particularly all the way from California. Sir, Mr. Will Green. Yes, Mr. Will Green.
Yes.
Can you say something? Yes.
Yes. Hi. So yes, my name is Will Green, and I live in Alameda, California, which is the bay from San Francisco. And I've been in California for almost 30 years, and I've taught for almost all of those 30 years. And I find that every year that I teach, I love teaching that much more than I did the year before. So thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts and have a conversation with you.
Okay, so let's proceed, sir, with the question. So here are the 5 questions that I have crafted for the social studies class so that the novice teacher, or the neophyte teacher, or the aspiring teacher in the field could be helped. So the first question is all about the personal and professional teaching practice. Sir, how can you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? Or can we say from being novice to expert in terms of teaching social studies?
Okay. Yes, in terms of teaching social studies, I would say that I am a 9 on that scale.
Okay. So thank you very much, sir, for that rating.
Yes.
So now the next question would be, why did you prefer a rating of 9 instead of a perfect 10? Although you said earlier that you have 30 years of experience, teaching experience.
Right,
Yes,
right. Well, that is a great question. And I've got to say that every year that I teach, I learn so much more than I knew the year before. And so you can never know everything, and you can never have all the best practices, and you can never have all the best elements at every moment. So I'm always aspiring to be just a little better every year. And I feel like each year I do. So being a 9, I'm always reaching for 10. And 10 is the elusive, hard to grasp, hard to get. And I don't know if, Socrates was a 10.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer, sir. So let's proceed to another question, a follow-up question or inquiry. So any sharing on pedagogical practices in social studies that might complement that personal rating? Yes, sir.
Right. Well, I feel like a lot of what I do in the classroom is making sure the kids realize that what is happening now in their lives has a connection to what has happened in previous cultures. And so by looking at history, you can see things and events and moments that are very similar to what's going on today. So that is one strand that I feel is really important, and that is, as far as pedagogy, I want them to have that connection. I also want to help develop them to think in terms of being a historian and how the historian mind works and how they can become closer to that thought process. So those two things, and then working with different layers of the students in the classroom, their multiple intelligences, because everyone has different strengths, and striving to, over the course of the year, work to have every single student in the classroom's strength be on stage in some way where they can really shine. So I have projects that have kids that can make music, they can make music, they can make videos, they can make documentaries, they can create art, they can do all of these things in one project. There's a lot of things that I push them to do. And so that's part of the pedagogy that I work with. And each year I find that there's new things that I come up with that the kids can try to develop their skills, because ultimately that's what I want. I want their skills to improve. And there are so many different ways to make that happen.
All right, so thank you very much. Also meaning to say that relevance is so important in the curriculum, and then the similarities of learners should be taken into account.
Right, exactly that.
Another question, sir. What is your personal philosophy in teaching the field, our field of concentration, sir?
Well, it is interesting. There's always sort of the component of chronology or timelines where, you know, for example, if you're starting with the ancient world, you're starting with distinct points in time, oftentimes with the Mesopotamians, the Babylonians, and then you're moving through into the Assyrians, and then you're moving into Egypt, and then you move into Greece, and then you move into Rome. And it's sort of this progression, but there's other pieces that are woven through the story. Because to me, history has the word story in it. And you've got to, for me, I've got to tell the story. There's stories there. That is what students love. They love the stories. So if you can tell the stories and then attach those stories to timelines and the framework of the chronology of it, things begin to make more sense. Along with that, it's really vital to give them context for what the ancient Greeks were facing. Athens faced different things than Sparta, and the Corinthians faced different things than both of them. And you have the wars against Persia, and you had the Ionian Greeks, and they had a different set of circumstances than the mainland Greeks. And so giving them the context of, if you're an Ionian Greek, you want something from Athens. If you're a Spartan, you want something else from Athens. If you're a Persian, you want something else from Athens. And the Athenians might want something entirely different. So the context, the mindset of these different city-states is huge. And along with that, I'm teaching it in ways differently this year because instead of just teaching the chronological time aspect, I'm teaching all about Sparta this year. And then I'm going to teach all about Athens, and I'm going to teach all about Persia and Lydia. And then I'm going to start weaving the story of how these three cultures came into becoming, you know, the Battle of Marathon, the Battle of Salamis, the Battle of Thermopylae, the Persian Wars. And so the story is going to come out, but I'm going to give them a strong foundation for each part of these city-state cultures and Persia. And then weave in how Persia is the East and Greece is the West. And this East-West conflict was happening since Troy, the siege of Troy. And that's 1100 BC. And today there are still conflicts 3,000 years later between the East and the West, with America and Persia, America and Iran, America and Iraq. And so bringing all these pieces together really helps the kids understand that history wasn't just back in 1184 or in 480 BC with Marathon or Thermopylae. There were many things that led up to this moment. So these are the pieces that I feel like are important in the way that I approach my personal philosophy in teaching social studies. And so a 9, I'm a 9 because there's always more. There's always more.
Yeah.
There's always more. Yeah.
Okay, sir. You're saying this, that there's always more. And with your sharing, it reminds me of my college years, particularly on the study of world history and the great civilization of the Westerners. Sir, that's very interesting point in the study of social studies. Now, sir, may I have another question? It seems that your sharing focuses on the history as part of social studies. Is that the aim of teaching social studies, Sir Will?
Well, so that is a piece of it. You also need to have the students gain skills. I want them to gain research skills. I want them to gain writing skills. I want them to gain editing skills. I want them to gain presentation skills. And I want them to think like a historian would think, putting things into the context of the time and the era, rather than only thinking about the past through today's lenses.
Okay. So, meaning to say, sir, that social studies needs history as its core subject. Is that right, sir?
That is the way that I do think of it. You know, philosophy comes off of that. The humanities comes off of that. There's a lot of things that are part of history, part of social studies. But yes, ultimately, I see social studies as being the historic aspect of what came before us.
Okay, sir. So, I have not introduced your background, sir. Would you please give us your background in teaching so that they can understand your philosophy or personal philosophy when it comes to teaching social studies? Yes, sir.
Okay, could you ask that again, please?
I said, will you please share your background in teaching, the number of years in your teaching, and where you're from, or the schools or the learning institutions where you belong, so that my
Sure.
fellow course mates could understand your personal philosophy in the teaching of social studies. Yes, sir.
Right. So I've taught for 29 years altogether, and I got my Bachelor of Science degree at University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. I was born in Alabama, in Birmingham, Alabama, and I lived in a lot of different states. And I got my teaching credential here in California, in Irvine, California.
Okay, thank you, sir. Are you teaching in secondary school or in a higher education department, sir?
Yes. So right now I'm teaching 6th grade. So they're 12-year-old students just entering
Thank you.
middle school. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that, sir. So now
Sure.
let's proceed to another question. So which among do you think are the 3 most important considerations if we are talking about expertise in the teaching of social studies? Please elaborate on your response. So these are the words or terminologies and concepts related to the practice of teaching social studies. So, sir,
Right.
can you choose 3 among these 10? Yes, sir.
Okay. So of these, and these are all great, these are all wonderful. For me, the way I approach it, it's going to be project-based learning, and it's going to be interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary way of teaching, and critical action, research, participant observer, and critical friendship. So those are the 3 that I really hone in on with my approach in the classroom with students. The project-based learning, I feel like it's so natural because I want my students to be doing something. If I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching them and they're listening and taking notes, they're not really active. They're passive learners. But when I turn it around and I give them a menu of options that they have to choose from, and there's 21 options on the menu, and they've got to choose 2 or 3 of them, and some of them are easy and some of them are hard, they have choice, and then they have to do something. And depending on what it is that we are studying at that time, they could be recreating part of the Bayeux tapestry. They could be making a temple of the Oracle at Delphi. They could be making a recreation of a hoplite shield. They could be making a number of different things. They could also be writing epic poetry like Beowulf. They could be writing, you know, like the Iliad, the Odyssey. They could be writing a major epic poem. There's so many different things that I have on these menus that allows them to create and do and present. And all of them have the students selecting what they feel is most important for their learning and is also going to build skills that they need. So with this, also the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary way of teaching, I think that really strengthens and deepens the learning. And it just depends on where you start with the history. And for example, is, you know, you and I are speaking English and you're in the Philippines and
Yes,
I'm in America. And there was at one time no English in the world. English evolved from other languages. And so combining the idea of history with English and sort of giving the history of English to me is really fascinating, because then you can go to the Angles, the Anglo-Saxons, you can go to Old Norse, you can go to how the Vikings, the Old Norse, conquered England and Normandy, and how these languages of the French and the Angles and the Saxons and the Norse all lived together, and language started to shift. And then you go from there to, in the 7th century, you had Caedmon and Caedmon's hymn, Caedmon's poem, which is the earliest known poem that has been written down in Old English. And this poetry is very similar to Old Norse. So there's this connection. And so you kind of weave through the history of all this, but it's really kind of English, but it's really kind of history. It's really kind of interdisciplinary. And that is what I love about teaching, is that when you combine different concepts together, it's bigger than the whole. You know, 1 and 1, 1 plus 1 is not 2, 1 plus 1 is 3. It's greater than the sum of its parts. And I love that. And then let's see, the last one, the critical action research and participant observer critical friendship. The way I'm interpreting this is that in the classroom, as a teacher, we need to make connections with the students. It can't be students are at a distance. Stay away from the teacher. You are a student. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know who you are, what you like. And I'm going to use that as part of things that I do in the classroom to help you connect with me, and therefore connect with the material that I share with you. And as far as the participant observer, I have the students do a lot of presentations, and I put a lot on the observers to give really good quality feedback to whoever is presenting. And I want them to be critical in their thought, but positive. And so these elements work in your social emotional learning, where you can't just say, oh, that was horrible. That was the worst presentation I've ever seen in my life. You would say, you know, you were very brave in getting up and speaking for 5 minutes today. I am very honored to be in the classroom while you were doing this. I do think that if you stop saying the word as often as you did, it would strengthen your presentation. So you give something that is positive and you give something that is a suggestion, and then the next person gives their thoughts about how that person presented and ways that they could improve. So I think that these elements are important. And then the critical action research is a variety of different sorts of approaches that we can give as teachers to have the students research with a specific goal in mind in their writing or in their presentation. And if they are going to, for example, present something that they've researched, but they are presenting not what they think of, let's say, King Henry VIII, but they come in dressed as King Henry VIII and they speak about themselves as King Henry VIII and the problems that the king faced when the king was alive, that is a totally different way of presenting the information, where the king is standing in front of the classroom speaking to a group of students. So I don't know. I do think in a lot of different ways about education, and ultimately I want the students to be learning, to be enjoying the learning, and to be challenged with gaining skills.
All right, so thank you for that, Sir Will. So I think your practices in social studies, particularly in introducing or incorporating innovative approaches, PBL, and curriculum integration through interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary way of teaching social studies are good. So, and then you shared about the critical action research, participant observer, critical friendship, focusing on students. Sir, how about the teacher being the participant observer on classroom observations on teaching, or are having this critical friendship between your co-workers? Can you share something about that?
Yes, absolutely. So with that, I find it really essential to work closely with my colleagues and share ideas. For example, we'll get together and I will say, this is something I've been thinking about. What do you guys think? And between the 2 or 3 of us, we will make the ideas that each of us has even better. And sometimes we will all do the same exact thing. And sometimes 2 of us will, and sometimes each of us will do something entirely different, but we make the others' projects better. And I am always trying to get other teachers to come into my classroom to observe. And I'm always trying to get my principal to allow me to go to other classrooms to observe, because I want to see what's going on. I want to be able to learn from what I'm seeing in other classrooms and also give feedback to the teachers that are teaching, whether they've taught for 40 years or whether they've taught for 2. I want to learn. And, you know, someone who's taught 1, 2, 3 years has a totally different viewpoint about education than someone who's taught for 40. They teach differently, and I can learn from both, and I want to. So I find that really a vitally important aspect of being a teacher in today's world. And those friendships you forge, sometimes they are within your department and sometimes they're across your department. And all of these bring something new to me that I can use to improve what I'm doing in the classroom to improve the skills of the students.
All right, sir. So, meaning to say that it is important to have these collaborations between your colleagues in terms of teaching the subject. So, sir, another question. Also, may I have this another question, sir? Although I have given only 5 questions to answer. An emerging question, sir, based on your sharing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so sir, you said that there's a big difference between a teacher who teach or who taught on in 2 years and compared to 40 years. So do you believe, sir, that the expertise in social studies or in instruction is measured through the teaching experience they have?
I do believe that the more you practice something, the more you do something, the stronger you are going to be in that. If you play piano for 2 years versus playing piano for 40 years, there's a different level of play. And I think that the student who is 2 years into playing piano, 2 years into teaching, is going to be very enthusiastic and is going to have a lot of ideas about how to play new songs. And that's what makes a new teacher exciting. And the teacher who, or the player who plays piano for 40 years is going to know how to play hundreds of songs, play them all in key, and have a delightful time. But they don't necessarily want to play the newest songs. But if they do, they could probably play them well, not with the enthusiasm of the new piano player. So I find that the spectrum of teachers, all teachers are important at Forest School, whether it's a first-year teacher just starting out, or whether it's a strong veteran teacher who is at the other end of the career. And I think that we can all learn from one another. I know that I learn every year, and I'm always trying to get better. And I always love to talk about school and what happens in the classroom and how to reach the kids. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Okay, so sir, that's a very good illustration of example when it comes to my question. Sir, let me put that in the context of the Philippines, especially on the teachers here. So we have the base teacher or the neophyte teachers in the field, and then the seasoned one. But there's a problem when it comes to their skills in the Philippines, particularly in technological skills for those seasoned teachers, may I say, sir. So other teachers, those that are in the base, has their skills when it comes to the use of technology. That's what I'm saying, sir. That is the teaching experience or the years of teaching is the absolute measure of the expertise of a teacher or an educator when it comes to teaching, sir.
Well, I think there's also the real passion, desire to be the best teacher you can be, because there are teachers that I teach with that the first day of school that you walk in and they're saying 182 more days of school. And it's like, for me right now, we have 7 weeks of school left. And I'm like, no, only 7 weeks left to work with my class. I don't want the school year to end. And I want to teach all the time. I want to teach the summer. I want to teach night school. I want to teach. I just want to teach. And there are some teachers who do very little. And they might have 40 years and they do very little. They might have 20 years and they do very little. They might have 5 years and they do very little. And then there's other teachers who they're 5 years in, 10 years in, 20, 30 years in, and they can't do enough. They want to do more. So there's got to be passion. And I find that the passionate teachers who are skillful, who are motivated, and who have a lot of background, skill, and knowledge in pedagogy and practices and interest in kids are fantastic teachers. So I always want teachers who are passionate about their topic, passionate about the students that they teach. And if any person coming from the Philippines who would look for a job in America, I'd say, boom, you've got to be passionate. If you show that passion and that spark, you're going to be wanted in schools here in California. And I'm sure that's the case in the Philippines as well.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Thank you for the clue word, passion.
Yes.
So additional tips, Sir Will, from you, because we are spending almost 31 minutes in this session. So but I'm enjoying it, sir.
Yeah.
So a concluding statement from you, sir. As an experienced educator, how can you help aspiring practitioners of the field in intensifying social studies instruction in developing countries like the Philippines?
Huh, that's a very big question.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I would say that it's important to find what your students are most interested in. If they are very intently interested in saving the environment, there's something that you can work with projects in the classroom. You can bring in speakers who work with the environment. If their passions are they want to be a star singer, a pop singer, try to get a singer who has recorded or a singer who is in the area that performs on the weekends or has been on stage for a number of years and loves to sing. Have them come in as a speaker. Have them Zoom come in if they can't visit. Have them come visiting by Zoom. There are, I really think you've got to look at what the kids' interests are and what your interests are as a teacher. Because if you tap into their interests, they're going to be interested in you. Therefore, they're going to be interested in your topic. If you are passionate about what you're teaching, they're going to be excited to be in your classroom because you're teaching with vibrancy, with energy. And students love that. And so I would say tap into your depth of interest in your topic, in your subjects, and dive into what the students' interests are. Use those interests to help guide what you can do to bring in additional flavor and guest speakers to show those students that you really care about them and they can be greater and achieve their dreams. So these are the things that I would say will help intensify social studies instruction and help aspiring practitioners develop educational levels in the Philippines and anywhere else in the world for that matter.
Okay, sir. So I think so. Thank you very much, sir, for your sharing today.
You're welcome.
It's been a wonderful day with you, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Especially that we have different time zone.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Very nice.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Anytime. Great to talk with you. All right.
Hope to connect with you soon, sir.
All right.
Okay, I will be stopping the record, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.